The second movement is the scherzo, and it's a little bit unusual actually that this comes before a slower movement. It would be more typical after the first movement to have a slower movement, but in this piece Beethoven chooses to do the scherzo, which is also allegro in this next movement. So a few things to notice at this point. Of course, we've got the time signature change here as well. And this is, or it should feel like 3 in a bar, not a 1 in a bar, 3/4 that you might feel in other pieces. So we are really emphasizing each beat, and that will naturally come as we go into this melody with those staccato notes being emphasized on there as well. So, of course, we've got new subjects in this section, in this movement, and it's going to start off with the cello. I can highlight that. And this is still in B flat major. So we've got to keep an eye on the keys just in this section. So we have a subject in B flat major, but we quickly have this descending counter subject in the violin, which towards the end you can see is more like F than it is B flat. So counter subject, I'm going to put F major. So within this as well, we've got a bit more emphasis falling on the second beats within those bars. We almost have a falling or a raising of those quaver notes and a little bit more emphasis on that second beat for each place there. Similar happens here. So we've got a little bit of displacement of where that strong beat is actually falling during this section. And we've got repetition, or not exact repetition, of that subject coming then in the violin part. So this is actually a combination of two elements because it's not repeating exactly what the cello is doing. It's the same shape, same melodic shape, but it's F again rather than B flat. So we've got that kind of modulation coming in the counter subject, which then lands this section here in F as well. So look out for those E naturals to give you the clues for where that's actually taking place. So the counter subject, again, we're kind of passing between the two string instruments. We've got this descending pattern coming up here, and this lands us back into B flat major again. So quite a short section to start us off. Just this 16 bar section has that dialogue, it has a subject, it has a counter subject, it has two keys kind of modulating between B flat and its dominant key. So it's kind of got a few things going on, right? You've got that sort of element of canon or counterpoint in there as well, that's just allowing those two instruments to speak to each other. So this is going to be the seed for what happens next in the piano part as well. The strings kind of take a break after the beginning of this repeat mark, and the piano has that same melody, same subject as the strings have previously had. Of course, we've got a bit more accompaniment going on in the lower part of the piano with these staccato notes kind of outlining some of the harmony, outlining triads a lot of the time as it goes through there, and then of course this ascending pattern here. So a lot of the chords in this section are quite straightforward. Bear in mind that you're still going to be in B flat for this section. A lot of the chords really are the first and the fifth, the B flat and the F chords. A few different inversions, of course, because as we come down here, for example, this is B flat, D, and F. We've got all the possible inversions if you want to count those as individual chords. But of course, you can think of the whole bar or whole measure there as focusing on those notes with, of course, some passing notes in there as well. So most of these chords are straightforward triads. Some are a little bit strange, or some of the notes are a little bit strange. For example, the middle octaves in these two bars here. So it could be that these are just passing notes passing through between two chords or between inversions of chords. That seems to make most sense because this G doesn't really fit with the F and the C, for example, here, but the A does. It would make sense for this to be a chord 5, but this doesn't make a lot of sense as a triad. So it could make sense that that's what's happening there. And similarly here, this is also a 5/7. It's got the E flat on the top, and it could really make sense that this is just passing through on that ascending scale there in the left hand of the piano. Similar kind of thing here. We've got what could definitely be A1. We've got the B flat, F, and D, sorry, at the top. And then similar kind of thing here. We've got the D's, D and B flat. Have a inversion chord there. But in here, this C doesn't really fit. It kind of comes with the C that's descending as a passing note there as well, or follows from that. They're not sounding at the same time. So this could be passing through here as well. We've got another E natural here, which seems like it could be resolving up into the F here. So depending on how you want to see this, this could be the dominant of the dominant, a secondary dominant, or you could see this as a little modulation into F. So looking out for those areas where we could be going into F, that would make sense for some of the sections that come next, because we've got a little bit of a continuation in what would be suitable as F major here as well. So of course the strings are returning. They have this pizzicato octaves section that is again kind of outlining F in bar 25 there. So I would suggest that this F modulation is important. It's not just for that one preparation into that one F chord. It's going on for a little bit further through here. So as we get a little bit further, this pizzicato accompaniment counter kind of continues for a while. A little bit of emphasis on the first beats with that here. I would suggest that you don't stay in F forever. The B flat does seem to return here. We're going to have, as a big clue, this E flat, switching us back into B flat. And we're getting more contrapuntal as we go down. We don't have the exact subject that we had in the beginning, but we have these sweet fragments that are keeping elements of that, adding in things like the triplet, adding in the slurs, making it a little bit different and adding to the interest. But in the piano part, we definitely have this new element here, this contrapuntal almost an arpeggio. It's a broken up chord tones following through there. So that's going to continue again with the piano part, really giving us clues towards the chords there as well if we're analysing the harmony. But as we go further on, we get a little bit more of this conversation, or rather playing together at this section, at this point, with the strings. Notice, of course, whenever we've got these clef changes, that's something that can throw you off if you have to identify a chord further down here and assume this is bass clef. That can throw you into potentially having some very weird chords. But these are starting here on the B flat and the D, so we've got thirds for most of the way through this section. It's also sensible to suggest that there's a change here. This seems like it could be a C major section. We've got these E naturals, but they're not resolving into F right here. We've kind of got that C major triad going on for a lot of this section. And we get a little bit more chromatic as we go down. We're keeping definitely those E naturals, and that's going to give us a little bit more of a little bit less perhaps of a sense of staying in the same key, so a little bit more chromaticism coming up. We do go back to B flat here, so this is sort of giving us a bit of a hint, a bit of a flavour, and then returning. But further along, we're going to have much more of a chromatic section, so that's a nice hint at what's going to come down later on. Something that is interesting to point out is what's going on in these bars here. This is another area where we could be changing into F. We've got this leading note as a clue here, parallels between the E natural and the F. And this section here, don't forget we're in the treble clef here. We have G and B in both parts. These are played an octave apart. So we've kind of got that E natural, G and B flat, which would be the seventh, the diminished seventh in the key of F. So again, you can continue F along this scale here. It's almost a scale with a bit of decoration from the subject, but again, returning back into the B flat at this section. So all the way through here as well, notice the fragments of that original subject or motif. We split it up here. This is a new element where it's being divided rather than played in octaves or thirds or any set interval. One part is playing it, the other is kind of responding in dialogue for this section. So that split motif idea is coming on there. So again, as we go forward, the next section does change keys again. We seem to have a very a subdominant feeling coming up here, mostly noticeable with these A flats that start appearing here. So it would be useful to think of the subdominant key, the E flat major, as you go through this section. And this really makes sense with these E flats, B flats coming down here. You could potentially think of this as the fourth chord and the subdominant and the tonic, or you could think in E flat, this one's the tonic, this one is the dominant. So this is quite a short segment where we're focusing on that subdominant. We probably would look at being back in B flat. Potentially we've got some F going on here with this, the E natural kind of returning to us here again. But there's not a lot of craziness going on here. This is lots of dialogue, lots of fragments of those themes. The accompaniment in the lower part of the piano is following outlines of triads. And we kind of link into a new section in this bar. This is really a link or a little bridge between what was going on in 97, 98 and what's coming up next. So the main difference for the strings, of course, is that the subject is not so clear now. We've got this kind of smoother, more legato stuff going on, and we don't have the placements on the bars as we had before. This is kind of delayed, kind of shifted compared to how we started out. So this is really going to give us a sense of perhaps building towards the end of a section, which we are in fact doing, coming up to where we could say the codetta starts, which is around here. So those staccatos and those fragments would become clearer to sort of restate what that subject was. And then we definitely get elements of that with a little bit more of those staccato notes in there. We don't have any real long notes in these few bars here. Towards the end of that, we've got a lot of ascending, which again might give us clues towards getting towards the end of the section. And we kind of have some fourths systems going on here as well. So if you think about, for example, the starting note of each of these sets, which notice as well we've got octaves, this conversation or dialogue between the strings and the piano. The strings are starting it on F here. Piano is starting on B flat. Then we go to E in the strings, E flat, sorry. A in the piano, and then similar kind of thing here continuing in the piano though with the D. We could follow that further down and go for G here, although it's changed a little bit because we're not having that dialogue anymore. But we're having this system of going down by a fourth each time, which is a nice chain to go through. And of course, this is really the end of a section. The A section, which I didn't really mention the overall structure of this movement, but we could certainly say that the section that we've done here is an A section. It's the first part of this movement. Overall, it does have an ABA form. We've got this next stuff that's coming up as kind of an expanded B section, but I will take a pause on the video here. So this is going to be the end of the A section, and in the next one we will go for the B section.